troubled heart. She carried nitroglycerin pills in a tiny bottle in her purse. She was feeling some uncomfortable pressure in her chest, and when she'd finally seated herself behind the wheel, she sat for a moment, letting a nitro pill dissolve under her tongue. She hadn't yet started the engine, and as she sat, the windows gradually fogged from her slow, heavy breathing. She didn't see the figure approaching her door. She was thinking, maybe, about her grandson in Albuquerque, or her daughter in New York City, saddened that all her family had fled Tamarack County and moved so far away. She knew the reason. He was at home, probably staring at the clock, complaining aloud to the empty room that she'd been gone too long and had spent too much. And if it was, in fact, her husband she was thinking of, she probably wasn't smiling, and perhaps her chest hurt a little more. The windows were heavy with condensation, and maybe she felt suddenly isolated and alone, parked a block from the bustle of Center Street and the welcoming lights of the shops. So she finally reached out and turned on the engine. She was undoubtedly startled when the shadow loomed against the window glass near the left side of her face, and that damaged thumper of hers probably started hammering a little harder. Then she heard the familiar voice. "Hey, Evelyn, you okay in there?" She pressed the button, and the window glided down. "Hello, Father Ted." It was the priest from St. Agnes, Father Ted Green, bending toward the window and blowing foggy puffs from where he stood on the curb. "I saw you get in and then nothing," he explained with a smile that conveyed both reassurance and concern. "I was afraid maybe you were having some difficulty." He was young and wore a black leather jacket, which looked good on him. To Evelyn Carter, there'd always been something a little James Dean about him. She was fond of saying so over coffee with her friends. And although that unsettled her a bit during Mass, she didn't find it at all unpleasant. "Just tired, Father," she replied. His gaze slid to the shopping bag in the passenger seat. "Busy afternoon, looks like. I hope you're planning on going straight home and getting a little rest." "A little rest would be good," she agreed. "All right, then. See you Sunday, and please give my best to the judge." He straightened and stood erect, smiling a kind of benediction, and he watched as she pulled carefully into the street and drove slowly away. Later, when he reported this conversation, he would say how wan she looked, and that he continued to worry. She headed past the high school and the gravel pit and took County 6 into the low wooded hills west of town. The snow was coming down more heavily then, and maybe she was concerned that if it began to fall in earnest, the way it had so often that December, she'd be trapped alone with her husband until the plows cleared the rural roads. If this was what she was thinking, there was a good chance she was frowning. 2 miles out of Aurora, she approached what everyone in Tamarack County called the Orley Cutoff. It was washboard dirt and gravel, but it was the quickest way to get to the tiny crossroads known as Orley, if you were in a hurry. Evelyn Carter and her husband Ralph, whom everyone except Evelyn called the Judge, lived on the cutoff, whose official name was 127th Street. Through a thick stand of birch and aspen long ago blown bare of leaves, Evelyn could see the lights of her home, which had been built a good 100 yards back from the road at the end of a narrow tongue of asphalt. Their nearest neighbor was a full quarter of a mile farther north, and to Evelyn the lights of her home looked cold and isolated and uninviting. When the judge finally passed away, she was planning to sell the house and move to New York City, to live where she had family and where there were people all around her instead of trees and emptiness. As she approached her driveway, she slowed. It was a difficult angle, and the Buick was enormous and felt awkward in its maneuvering. She always took the turn with great care. When the judge was